Jeff McMillian.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to see you. Just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy opera schedule and your, I want to say your author schedule, because you do have a book out, a jazz book.
That's right, yeah. Well, right now is a good time in terms of the opera schedule because we're a little bit between seasons. We kind of have a two-parter in the fall that goes till December, and then we have a little bit of time to prepare for the summer in June. So we're between right now. It's great. We're kind of just getting those 3 shows ready to go for when we're back on stage in the War Memorial in San Francisco. And this is also a great time to spend on writing. So I am actually trying to do that. It's tough to fit it all in, but I do the best I can.
It's nice that you can make time for your talent. I read Delightfully.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, what a wonderful read for me. It was just a wealth of information about Lee Morgan, trumpeter Lee Morgan.
Yeah, working on a biography of Lee Morgan was a huge part of my life. It's a huge project that took, I'd say, probably 10 years to write the book. A lot of research, a lot of writing, but it's something I'm still kind of involved with in an incredible way. I mean, in doing the work on the book, I made a lot of great contacts with people who were, Lee's colleagues, Lee's family, and these are all relationships that I have today, and I'm really grateful for it. I mean, it's one of those projects that I gave a lot to, and I feel like I'm always getting a lot back from. So it's been a really rewarding project to be involved with.
Well, reading it, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, in Lee Morgan, I mean, who doesn't love listening to Lee Morgan play trumpet, and play in his bands and the Jazz Messengers. It's just some of the greatest music of, the post-1957 period, I think. I mean, he's just created so much. Luckily, he had a short life, but he created a lot of music.
I was in the story. I was in the moment. Like, you went back to his early days, and you had connections there.
Yeah,
it was intimate.
Well, thank you. That was one of the things I wanted to do, was kind of see. We all know he was just like this great trumpet player, but how did he get that way? Is kind of one of my first questions. And when I started out working on it, there was no biography of Lee Morgan that really satisfied that question as far as I was concerned. So I just started looking into his journey and his path. He grew up in Tioga, which is North Philly, and he went to Mastbaum Vocational Technical High School, which is an unusual thing to think about now, that people could go to high school for the trade of playing music. I mean, we battle so much to keep music in the high schools. Well, back in Lee's day, you could go to school in order to become a trade, study the trade of playing music professionally.
Like Detroit's Costech.
Just like Costech, yeah. They were another one of those amazing programs, and Costech was just like Mastbaum in terms of having a lot of really great jazz alumni. That's one of those amazing aspects of Lee's journey and the beginning of his, kind of musical life, is that he kind of grows up in this period where there's so much around him, and he was really proactive about just getting everything he could get and learn everything he could learn from the people around him.
I read that in your book.
Yeah. I mean, he was like a sponge. He committed. He knew what he wanted to do, and he just got together with all the people who could help him, who he could learn from, and then just put it all into his music and into playing trumpet.
It seems like a natural subject for you, because you kind of take what you want from what's around you as well. I'm saying this because I don't know too many people involved with opera and jazz at the same time.
That's right.
Like, I know people who come from musical households or so forth, but but for the most part, I don't see it as a vocation, like a career path. Like, okay, 1 minute you're doing the publicity for the opera, so you know something about opera, I would think.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I love opera too. It's just one of those things. I mean, I would quote Lee Morgan. You know, he said, if it's all music, and it's either good music or it's bad music, or I love great music, and I find that a lot in the opera world that I'm a part of these days. In my career. Definitely found that as a listener and as a young player, trying to learn how to play. Just like try to gravitate to the things that blow my hair back,
Yes,
excite
yeah.
me, and there's a lot of that in music. So yeah, I'd say Lee Morgan's Caramba is one thing, and Verdi's Il Trovatore is like another thing that I really love and can get my pulse pounding a little bit. I mean,
They should really come inside.
I want to invite them all to come in and see. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, you got me in. Before that, I think I just went to the opera like one time just to say I went, just to see what it was about. I wish more people would do that.
And you see all these new people, young people I'm dating.
Yes, I saw
like,
that.
Wow, I don't know who these people are.
And they're casually dressed like
they're
or some career casual or something like that.
Sure.
Like they're just having a good Friday night and they're like, well, why don't we go see an opera?
Yeah, so they're kind of answering that challenge, of like walking down Van Ness and saying what's in that building. Well, they've taken the initiative and come inside, and I certainly hope they have a great experience.
And I don't know why. Well, I'm glad it's starting to pick off with them because the benefactors, we love them too. They keep it supported and going.
Yeah.
But somehow I wish, more people would include different types of genres of music in their lives. Like if you like jazz, maybe you could like opera. If you like rock and roll, maybe you could like Western. I mean, and I feel like I did a little bit of research around opera and jazz, and it came up that the same market, it's the same market of, the people.
Oh.
Like people who like jazz, it's easy for them to switch over to opera and vice versa.
Yeah.
Like it's the same market.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's
I
interesting.
don't see it happening a lot, but it makes sense.
It does.
And I mean, that's my world, but I always say in the kindest way, opera people are the worst. Just like I'd say, jazz people are the worst. And they get hung up on details of like, that wasn't Charlie Persip playing drums on that. That was actually Max Roach, and they'll correct people.
Oh, then that's a sport.
Yeah, it is like a sport.
Rights, yeah.
Yeah. And opera people are the same way.
They are.
They
Ballet
fixated.
people too.
Oh, ballet dancers? Oh, totally. Because people are passionate about it. And I'd say the worst, they're the worst, but I actually really admire it. I really love it.
Yeah.
And I'm that way too.
Yeah, I can get I can nerd out on some of the stuff. The jazz, I feel like a lot of people now are saying, they're like not so interested in jazz because it's just for snobs. It's boring. It's for snobs. And excuse me, they don't attach to it, like they did when it was popular. Like it's been dwindling ever since, maybe.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but in Delightfully, I think he's a good poster person for a well-rounded, really cool person who's really good at his craft.
One of the things that I think kind of inspired me to work on the book is that, Lee Morgan's music, when I was getting interested and, I was just out of high school, I guess, and CDs were the way we consumed music in those days.
Oh yeah, I was there.
His CDs were always in print. and you could find Candy and Caramba or not, maybe not Caramba, that came a little later, but the Sidewinder, Search for the Moonlight, like all these albums were in the bin card in the CD store, and you could buy a bunch of Lee Morgan. But if you tried to find Big John Patton or something like those esoteric names that I started to really get into and like later on, they just weren't available. And I think that is an artifact of, you know, the musicians and the people who really support the music never lost sight of Lee Morgan. He was always important to them, like he was becoming important to me. So I think that's kind of how I got into that tract, because it's like, what, this is somebody who really speaks to everyone, you know, somebody, he really speaks to me. And his music it's kind of still that way, you know. He gets sampled by people who are coming up. Everyone knows, I think, if you have any kind of interaction with the jazz world, like Lee Morgan is cool. Lee Morgan is one of the guys, you know, he's like one of those names. And Miles Davis, of course, is like an icon and a name that everyone associates with jazz. Even if they don't listen to it, they know that name. But as soon as you become kind of more of a jazz person, Lee Morgan is one of those names that bubbles up. Freddie Hubbard, Woody Shaw, like all these other names will kind of come around. Mm-hmm. But Lee is one of the big cats in this field. And I think the reason why is pretty evident when you listen to his music, because you're never going to mistake a Lee Morgan record for, you know, a Richard Williams record or a Miles Davis record, or, you know it's Lee when he's playing.
Yeah, there's some fire there that I hear with him, and I feel like there's no mistaking.
Yeah, that's what he does. But the same way with opera, you know, but it's different because in jazz, the players are improvising their own personal statement and creating something on the fly that's personal. Mm-hmm. In opera, they're all singing the same music, but you can tell when it's Jussi Björling singing versus when it's Mario Delmonico singing versus when it's Jonas Kaufmann singing or Penny Patti, and that's even if they're singing the same notes. Which I love, you know, and I love being able to hear something and say, that's a musician with a real, you know, kind of sound identity, and somebody that I can hear what they're doing, and it's personal, it's unique to them, and it speaks to me.
And I feel like that goes to the movie I recently saw about Lee Morgan. That documentary, I think, I'm not really sure who put it out, but it just shows how he was just ruling at his time. Like he was just at this, I guess it turned out to be his apex, or you know, that somebody would end his life short like they did. Like that's an opera right there.
It kind of is,
right?
Yeah. I don't mean to make light of it. It's just, it is an amazing story that, you know, Lee Morgan was cut short in his life. He was only 33. He was murdered by the woman who had helped him get back on his feet and from his drug addiction. And they had a relationship that was a little unusual, perhaps, but, you know, they kind of crossed paths at a time that really helped Lee. Because who knows where he might have been if Helen hadn't come into his life. At the same time, he gave a lot to her. And,
yes.
And then when he was getting ready to leave her, she couldn't really imagine a life without him. And it's a very tragic ending that she went to the club, Slugs on the Lower East Side. They had an argument, and, you know, they had a pistol that they had as a couple, you know, because Lee was leading his own band at that time, and he was the paymaster, or she ended up being the one who would pay all the musicians. So the club owner would give her a big stack of money, and then she would have to pay the drummer and the pianist and do it that way. So they had a pistol for protection, and
wow, that's rough.
She murdered him. She shot him. It wasn't like a you know, I'm going to kill you. It kind of escalated, an argument escalated, and it just happened that way. She happened to shoot him one bullet in the chest, and he bled out on the floor of the nightclub. It's really a tragic story.
It really is.
And you know, so many people I talked to in working on Delightful Lee, they all talked about, you know, kind of what Lee could have done and the kind of path he was on. And I mean, I remember one person, Judy, talked about Lee had all these dreams. You know, he wanted to bring back opera. He wanted to write a black opera. That was one of his goals, and he also wanted to collaborate with, oh gosh, I can't think of her name.
A musician?
Yeah, she was Roberta Flack.
Oh, Roberta Flack.
He wanted to collaborate with her or perform her Fly Away, you know, pop music and classical music, which was, you know, his background. He could play all that. He was an incredible sight reader.
And I was going to say, he took the time to learn that at high school.
Absolutely. He was, there's a musician from Philadelphia that was a little bit older than Lee, but it was one of his mentors in a way, because he was just the greatest trumpet player of that generation to come out of Philly. It was Wilmer Wise. And he went more in a classical direction. And he ended up playing a lot of theater gigs, and he just became like a session guy and a theater guy and a classical guy, and he could do it all. He's one of them. and he's an icon among trumpet players, especially in Philadelphia and New York. They all, seems like, you know, like Wynton Marsalis, you know, was one of his students at one point. And I mean, Wilmer Wise is the guru. And he kind of came before Lee a little bit, but I interviewed Wilmer about Lee Morgan, and he just said, I was so impressed with this young guy, and he could have done anything. He could have gone and done classical and jazz at the same time, the way Wynton Marsalis did, you know, 12 years earlier, or 15 years earlier, maybe. He could have kind of done that in that kind of path-breaking voice. I
think that's so impressive. Like, as an artist, you don't put boundaries or limitations on yourself. Like Lee Morgan, you know, says, there's no reason why I couldn't do this, that, or that.
Yeah.
It was just like low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, it's like, what should I do next?
Yeah.
And another one of Lee's, it was kind of like his protege, a good friend of mine, Kenny Sheffield. He said Lee was feeling a little stagnant with some of the things that he was expected to play, like playing Sidewinder every set of every gig he played since the record hit. And it's like, I'm sure a lot of musicians who have a hit record can understand. It's like, thank goodness, but also like, oh my God, I have to play it again. And Lee was getting a little tired of that, and also getting tired of some of the kind of bebop formats that he had played for so long. He was really being drawn in different directions that were, you know, kind of outside of his comfort zone, and you know, really testing, you know, his creativity and what he could do. And one of the people was Marvin Hannibal Peterson. Hannibal is how he's known now, Hannibal Lukumbo. But he was like this young player, and everybody was kind of looking at him like, going, what is he doing? What is this music? And Lee was looking at it and thinking, I think Hannibal's the guy who's really doing something right now. Like, I gotta reassess my style and see if I can, you know, grow in a new direction. So that's, you know, another aspect of the tragedy of Lee Morgan's murder, is that, you know, we don't have an opportunity to learn how that would have played out for him. I mean, we can follow Hannibal Peterson, we can follow Roy Campbell, was another person who studied with Lee, who was kind of far out as a trumpet player, but a real creative type and a real gentleman. So yeah, I mean, I love that. You know, as a 33-year-old, he was a grizzled veteran because he'd been doing it since he was 18.
Yeah.
At the elite A level,
Yeah.
he'd been doing it for that long, and so he's only 33, but he was a little. He was further along in that journey than a lot of people are.
Yeah, he was
at
more
33.
seasoned, right? Because I was
seasoned.
reading in
That's the way to put it.
your book, he was out there with his mentors, like playing here and there, and then people would hear about him. Musicians would hear about him, established musicians, and then he would jump on those invitations, and so it happened seemed like it happened quickly.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for going over all this Lee Morgan's
My pleasure. I love talking about
inside
Lee Morgan.
information.
And you mentioned the film. I worked a little bit with that filmmaker in terms of helping, recommend some musicians he should talk to, and kind of consulting early on. What he created in that film is incredible, and it was on Netflix for a long time.
I thought I could make a correlation
Maybe that's where
between
you saw
your
it.
book and that film, that documentary film.
And I mean, I'm glad whenever I hear that someone read my book, or someone took something from my book and was fascinated by it. But I just think of like, oh my gosh, I called him Morgan documentary. How many people have seen that? How many people who would never have heard of Lee Morgan have come to this story through that film? So I'm really grateful for it. Casper Collin is the filmmaker. All power to him. I love it. He's brought a lot of people to Lee Morgan's music and to the story of his life, his short life, and his death. So, yeah, it's a compelling story. At the opera, we have spent a lot of time working with Peter Sellers, the director. And I remember,
Is that the Pink Panther guy?
No, a different Peter Sellers.
Okay.
He's affiliated with the opera and classical music. And he's just a really great creative mind. He's on the scene for what we do at the opera. And he, when he was with us in 2017 for a show, he was talking about, we got to talking about Lee Morgan. And he's like, I called him Morgan. It was like a duet.
He said he saw what?
I called him Morgan.
Oh!
He said it was like a duet between Lee and Helen.
Oh,
and their
yes.
lives, and they're intersecting, and their kind of counterpoint. And I thought, what a beautiful way to put it.
A duet. Yeah. Yes.
The film is almost as much about her as it is about him. And
that is so true.
Yeah.
It's some really good writing that it's based on. Like, it's still storytelling.
Yes.
Based, your book is helpful. Your contributions are really significant and important. And then they were able to, whatever else other sources they used, they were able to really tell a story, an intimate portrait.
Yes. Yes.
And I thank you for that book.
Oh,
I think I want to read it again. It's like that. It's like, I feel like I'm there. I'm in Philadelphia. Is it Philadelphia?
Yeah.
I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm in these various areas, and I'm in New York City, and I'm, it's like I'm there at that period in time. And it's just such an intimate portrait. So thank you for that. So you're writing now. I wonder what your next book is going to be.
Yeah. Well, I'm not really ready to talk about it yet. It's still kind of in the primordial ooze phase or something, but it has to do with opera and the person who got San Francisco Opera on the map and started Gaetano, Maryland. I'll just talk about it. Gaetano, Maryland. Fascinating, risk-taking, innovative, just won't take no for an answer, kind of entrepreneurial type, who, the thing that really attracts me to his story is before he found San Francisco Opera in 1923, he came here to this country as an immigrant in 1899 as a musician, just out of conservatory in Naples. And he goes through all the rungs of the paying your dues system. He does all these musical jobs and long tours of one-nighters where he's like moving in through Duluth, Minnesota, and just into Bozeman, Montana, one night in between in 1904 when it wasn't easy getting around the United States, especially like the Midwest and the North, kind of Montana area and the Northwest. It wasn't easy getting around, and they would just get on trains, go, and they would do these big shows with this big diva at the time, Eugenia Mantelli, and they would put on 3 operas or scenes of operas, and then pack it all up onto a train and go on to the next thing. And Merylo was the kind of the musical, the leader, I guess. He's the one who had to keep everything organized. And so he had this kind of itinerant life. It was not easy. They didn't always get paid. They would go through all this effort, and then not have anything to eat that night because the guy couldn't pay them or something, and then they would have to get on the train and go to the next place. And I mean, it was just a tough life. And then he is on Broadway right after that, involved with kind of the early days of musical theater. The Nadi Marietta is one of the famous early musical, operetta / American musicals. And he is the conductor and pit for that famous show. Like our guy Tom Merylo here in San Francisco. It's kind of an amazing story, and he did that all through the war. He was on Broadway, like 1,001 nights on Broadway.
That makes sense. San Francisco is like that. It's just like that to me, and you'll find these interesting stories about these pioneering people who don't take no for an answer too easily. They have vision, and they do something that's just so out of the box sometimes.
Yeah.
And that sounds like like a story that you can grab hold of and say, I like being in this space. I like that kind of energy
Absolutely.
and history.
I love it too. I mean, I look at some of these tours that he was doing in the early part of the century, and I think, how could anybody emerge from this experience and be like innovative and dream and have the grand dream and aspiration? I think that kind of work would just beat you down.
Yeah.
And you'd be just like, oh my God, can I just get paid and go home?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have any energy to dream big.
And he's like, no, I'm holding on to my dreams.
I'm
gonna go with this, I can do that, and
he's like, but what
keep
if we
moving.
did this?
Yeah, keep reinventing. So it's been such a pleasure. I'm so happy you were able to come in today. And
Oh, my pleasure too.
yeah, so I'll see you at the opera and
Yes,
maybe at the
indeed.
jazz
Yeah.
show.